I can imagine that my pursuit of transversality, that is my tendency to operate in diverse fields of knowledge, may be surprising, and in some cases, even the object of mistrust or outright condemnation. Our society, it must not be forgotten, is a relentless labeling organization. In practice, everyone is required to wear a single, clearly visible identification tag, and only one. Those who wear multiple tags, as I do, are usually a source of embarrassment. However, like it or not, the pursuit of transversality has certainly been a constant throughout my now long intellectual journey. Every time I've been engaged, practically or theoretically, in a particular field of activity, I've always questioned what the possible convergences of these fields are or could be with others, near and far. This has often led me, in my considerations, to go beyond the activity I was carrying out. Even at a very young age, my concern, I would almost say my obsession, was to contribute to a total, comprehensive vision of culture. Of course, in hindsight, such a project was overly ambitious, but it certainly anticipated to some extent my enduring interest in what you have called the transdisciplinarity, which I would prefer to call, adopting a recently coined expression, a third culture. That is the attempt to overcome, or at least make less drastic, the famous dichotomy between hard and soft sciences. On the other hand, I'm aware that in a society like ours, characterized by the role played by specialists in science and technology, devotees of a third culture, such as myself and many others, well, don't have an easy life. They are celebrated and at the same time discriminated against by the media as exponents of a world that is ultimately alien to true culture. I am convinced that this state of affairs is in the process of changing. We must get used to the idea that culture in the future will be the result both of the work of specialists who, like speleologists, explore as yet unknown sectors of reality in depth, and of the work of non-specialists who, like tireless globetrotters, travel everywhere, pursuing their curiosity and seeking to establish connections between the different lands they visit. Certainly, caution and mistrust of uncontrolled excursions beyond one's discipline are always warranted. But this cannot mean, out of principle, ignoring the contribution of those who seek to establish with due rigor points of contact between different disciplines. To call them out bluntly as know-it-alls seems to be dangerously reductive. Interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity not only respond to an increasingly pressing need for cooperation between disciplines, but they're also an expression, and always have been, of the inescapable ambition for universal knowledge. Tomás, Maldonado. Well, thank you, Pia Lanciotti, for this extraordinary interpretation. Thank you, Piccolo Teatro. We are guests. Gianfranco Licali, Gian Maggia is here with us this morning. So welcome to the second annual report on ecosystem design in Milan. along with the design department of the Politecnico in Milan. We have opened with a text taking from Arte and artfatti, which is a publication from Feltrinelli back in 2010 with Hans Ulrich Obrist, which is surely showing the leitmotif, which will go all around this morning. So we spoke about transversality. Why is Maldonado so important if we want to interpret current times? Foundation Feltrinelli owns the fund Tomás Maldonado, which is a full legacy of projects, written text, and the director Massimiliano Tarantino from the foundation is here with us. He will open the morning. He will tell us why the thinking of Maldonado is so important to understand current times. Welcome. Welcome, Massimiliano Tarantino. Well, thank you so much. Welcome, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The words of Tomás Maldonado that opened this meeting are not a mere tribute. Rather, they are an essential reminder that design is not an elegant profession. It is not a reassuring backdrop of contemporary capitalism. It is, in a way, of being in the world and taking a stand. This is where I'd love to start. Maldonado gave us 3 insights that we cannot afford to forget today in Milan. The first, there is no such thing as an innocent design, whether it is a simple object or an entire urban space. Every choice of form, material, technology is always a choice of society. It can widen the spaces of inclusion or narrow them, selecting who can move with ease and who, on the other hand, will be forced to do so by stumbling. The second, the knowledge we need is not that which is closed within a self-referential specialization, but that which is handled by the Polytechnic intellectual, knowledge capable of combining technique and politics, which does not isolate the material project from its impact on working conditions and forms of coexistence. A figure who is above all embodiment of different but complementary perspectives, the lawyer, creative, engineer, which, when intertwined, they transform skills into shared consciousness. The third, designing, is in itself an act of hope. Not a naive hope, but a design hope, as Maldonado called it. The ability to see in things as they are the seed of possible change. In times of mistrust, that is already a clear stance. If we look outside this room, we can see it clearly. We're living in a present crowded with crises, economic and territorial inequalities, precariousness, climate emergency, new material and educational poverty, a politics often focused on managing the immediate. We can no longer limit ourselves to commenting of the world. We must decide which direction to push it in. In this scenario, Milan is both a showcase and a laboratory. It is the city that lights up every year with the Salone del Mobile and Design Week and presents itself to the world as the capital of creativity and innovation. But it is also the city where the gap between those who live in the center and those who live in the suburbs is widening, where access to housing, services, and education is not guaranteed equally, where the risk of the poverty trap affects entire families and neighborhoods. With this report, Ecosistema Design Milano has attempted to do something simple and radical at the same time, to take design seriously, to make it a tool for interpreting the city and the impact that design itself produces. This is not a pretext for a self-congratulatory self-portrait, but an act of lucidity. Milan, the city that never stops, feels the need to look in the mirror and question the quality of its design ecosystem without compromise, to ask itself whether it really broadens the scope of rights or whether, on the contrary, it is becoming one of the silent engines of selection and exclusion. And it is where Maldonado becomes our contemporary again, when he reminds us that designing always means taking a stand. The issue ceases to be abstract. Responsibility is also at stake here today in the living flesh of Milan, in the neighborhoods that are changing, in the houses that are missing, in the services that are available in some areas but not in others. What emerges from the work we're about to hear is not a reassuring picture, but neither it is a condemnation. It is the image of a city that runs, that produces beauty and value, at the same time of a city where not everyone has the same opportunity to join in this race. It is within this tension that design, as Maldonado reminds us, is called upon to get its hands dirty with reality, freeing itself from the caricature that reduces it to a frivolous detail of style. Ecosistema Design Milano was created for this very reason, to transform a widespread, that some vague perception into shared knowledge. It puts numbers and narratives in order, but above all, anchors them to real places and supply chain to tangible practices. It shows concretely where the project produces accessibility and services, mobility, neighborhood spaces, and where, on the other hand, it produces new barriers. This work speaks to multiple audiences. It speaks to those who govern the city, encouraging them to consider design as a lever of public policy, something that can reduce gaps if guided by a conscious compass. It speaks to the world of design, reminding it that creativity does not end on the designer's table, but when it becomes an opportunity for a fairer life for those who live in the city. It also speaks to communities, to the social actors who animate neighborhoods, so that they can use these results to strengthen their claims, to demand consistency between words and real change. Against this backdrop, a simple conviction returns. It is not enough to denounce injustices. We must arm, if we want to use a strong word, those who want to change them. This report does just that. It does not offer definitive answers, but it circulates antibodies into the city's immune system that are capable of mending urban rifts, and at the same time opening up fruitful conflicts, feeding the constructive part that can bring together designers, administrators, and residents. The season we're living is not compatible with submissiveness. If it is a time for choices, like the foundation, which I'm honored to chair, and 2025 season will really be protagonist season, then design must also become a place where choices are visible. In approved projects and those that remain in the drawing board, as well as in the priority we give to design spaces and the people who pass through them. We will soon delve into the research work consisting of data and maps. Rather than a sterile assessment to be filed away, it must become a new astronomical chart. It can show us point of light, but it is up to each actor to orient themselves, starting from their own role to decide in which direction to push the piece of reality they have in their hands. Maldonado taught us that design is not just about form, but also about responsibility. His design hope is not a short-sighted, mannered optimism. It is the idea that every project, even the smallest, can move the boundaries of what we consider possible one step further. Also, and above all, from this very awareness, the direction in which Milan and with its design will continue its journey would also, I will dare to say, above all, depend on its awareness. Thank you. Well, thank you, Massimiliano Tarantino. Thank you so much for this beautiful introduction to this annual report. And we're very much delving into this report, which is the result of important yearly efforts. We'll try to navigate through the main numbers, 320 pages, 31 contributors, 10 working tables, a real exploration of the impact of a Salone del Mobile and Design Week, but also the strength, which are also pushing towards the evolution into the future. And I really would love to start from the very first portion of the annual report, the infrastructure of the future. I'm inviting Maria Porro. Maria, President of Salone del Mobile. Well, I've been asked to take a seat here. Well, just make yourself at ease. By the way, the book is there. The book is there available, and it's quite heavyweight as well. It's 320 pages, many tables, and of course, as Tarantino said, each one of you will use it differently, right? So let's start from the title, a Salone del Mobile.Milano, an infrastructure for the future. What does it say? What does that mean? Well, first of all, I need to thank few people. First of all, I'd love to thank all of the attendees here in this theater today. They are showing how they are interested into this huge efforts. I'd love to thank all of those who gave a voice to Maldonado, starting the way we did. It's been a fantastic opening. Thank you, Director Tarantino. In his speech, the very core of what we're going to be talking today was very much there. And then I'm very thankful to institutions because they have been engaged in this project for the past 2 years. The City Hall councillors, Mrs. Capello, is here with us today. She's been collaborating on a continuous basis with us, Region Lombardy, and the Politecnico of Milan, which is the third big player that we've been lucky enough to work with. Now, talking through Salone as an infrastructure, well, I try to imagine what are the key features of this infrastructure. Well, first of all, it is a stable infrastructure, and let's not take this for granted. It holds huge value. For over 60 years, the infrastructure has been there. It's been well-rooted and established in the city, and it is not there to run away, but it's been built over time. It is an economic infrastructure, and thanks to the economic solidity are actually stemming all of those numbers that we're going to talk through today. It is a cultural infrastructure as well, because it is delivering a knowledge, interdisciplinarity, confrontation. It is also an urban infrastructure because it was born in the city center of Milan. It moves to Rho, but it is still preserving this beautiful relationship with the rest of the city. It is a relational infrastructure, a kind of an intangible value, because it has its ability throughout 365 days in a year to actually develop business relationships, cultural relationships, developing a dialogue, conversations, also amongst different parts of the world. And all of this makes Salone the infrastructure for the future. As Direttore Tarantino said a moment ago, we do have a design hope. So the future infrastructure delivers this very hope. As Tarantino said, we do have a lot of numbers and tables in the annual report. I'd love to understand from you what are the key numbers. Well, these are the key numbers. They're showcased on the slide. I was actually asked to deliver some numbers, not the traditional ones, but it makes sense. You know, these numbers they really speak for the international nature of all of these. Over 2,000 exhibitors from 37 countries, 300,000 attendees from 160 countries, and the impact, the urban economic impact measured by the Centro Studi is 278 million. It is surely the week that delivers the biggest economic impact with respect to the rest of the year, and this is an important thing to say as well. Other numbers which are very important for us, well, they have to do with how lively our exhibitors are, because many exhibitors were newly joining, or perhaps they were coming back after being away for some years. 68% of professional operators come from abroad. Again, international nature of this Salone del Mobile, which means that our efforts are being paid off. 1.3 million of matchmaking. What is matchmaking? Well, this is the scanning of tickets when people are entering the booth. If we consider 1,000 exhibitors leveraging this service, it means that we have an average 1,000 international users who have been able to share their profiles, which means a qualified contact, which is so valuable nowadays. Other important numbers we're proud of? Well, this one. So I spoke about infrastructure of the future. Over the last 2 years, students have increased by 34.2%. I mean students visiting Salone del Mobile. So increase 34.2%. 39,000 visitors to Salone Satellite. Well, there were more than 39,000, because those who purchase a normal ticket, they can also visit Salone Satellite, but in this particular case, it means that 39,000 people will exclusively visiting Salone Satellite. 2025, we had 725 exhibitors from 37 countries, and a big round of applause to Marva Griffin for her beautiful and huge efforts over the last few years. In 26 years, we have had some 13,000 young designers in 26 years on top of the 350 design schools that we have engaged. This is an important number for us as well, because we're talking about the workforce here. And we've measured 58,155 stand construction workforce presences. This is crucial, as you can imagine. Well, numbers of sustainability, there are too many, so I would advise that you just go through the book yourself. We've been certified ISO, and ISO keeps increasing standards year after year, so we are actually called to improve year after year. We worked on accessibility this very year. We made this important step to skip lines, to allow to skip lines when having access to the exhibitor stands and booth. You know, you have to be able to understand what the problems are to fix them the best way possible. So all of these numbers are truly important for us as well. Perhaps one last number. I don't want to become boring here. So this is about the vision project that we've been engaged with for many years. So 93% of our exhibitors are saying they will be coming back next year. And this is a number that you want to read along with new exhibitors newly joining, and also those that are coming back. So, and this is clearly saying that there is an ongoing livelihood and vitality. Well, Salone del Mobile not only attracts that 68% of visitors from all over the world, but it is also traveling all around the world to promote Salone and to open in new markets. So this global network that you've also worked on, is it becoming helpful in the future? Yeah, well, there were some additional few numbers, but I would advise that you actually read them perhaps yourself. Okay, this is something I very much like. I'm not addressing your question, but I will go back to your question in a moment. So these are the adjectives that, to the visitor, best describe Salone del Mobile. This is a diagram. Can you see the 6 top adjectives where international ranks first? And now I'm addressing your question. 96%, 84% business, culture, creativity also. They're ranking quite nicely. It means that in the perceptions of Salone visitors, so those who purchase the tickets, so in the visitor perception, business, developing business with the international nature, hand in hand with research for innovation and creativity, culture are equally important. Well, maybe if we had developed this diagram 15 years ago, we would have perhaps seen different adjectives. But you see, we have now a kind of equal interest in many different aspects, not just one prevailing. This is what I'm saying. So the international nature, international scale, and I'd love to get back to Salone Satellite, and also the activity that we've run all over the world. So we've decided to attend Expo Osaka through the permanent exhibition from Salone Satellite. And what is it? Well, actually, our flagship at Salone del Mobile speaks about young talents that companies have invested on. And this is by the way, this is an exhibition that we would like actually to tour with all over the world. And you can imagine how important this can be. This also means that we're not just building something that is temporary. We're very much focusing on a long-standing project. For example, we've developed the drafting feature arena. We started off with Forma Fantasma 3 years ago, with content being delivered by Annalisa Rosso. And it was being developed also with Lombardini 22 on Euroluce, Beppe Finessi, whom I believe is here with us today. And thanks to the collaboration with Forma Fantasma, we've actually been able to deliver one of the most beautiful projects over the year. This was a City of Light, one of the examples where prototypes were introduced. Raritas is the name of the new upcoming project. Project Raritas is adding a new important asset to the Salone. For the first time, we're actually having galleries as part of our exhibitors. And for the first time, we'll be devoting to industrial design, but also opening up to collectibles, the so-called collectibles, but also vintage, to highlight that industrial design product can actually increase its value over time. So it has an interesting longevity. And we're also welcoming antique exhibitors. So we launched this Salone Raritas in London. We started the narrative in London, and then we traveled to Shanghai. So you were actually asking this very question. Last year, we developed a beautiful relationship with the Wetzbund Art Fair, and we've developed this installation curated by Matilde Cassani. This year, we have been able to attend the most important panel to tell about us. So basically, we keep developing networks, offering our content all over the geographies of the world. Well, this is something that we have extensively spoken through. This is very, very recent, and although it is the result of 3 years of efforts, extraordinary efforts, of the entire structure from Salone del Mobile, which is not made up by so many people, and in collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well as a Saudi Ministry of Culture. So Italian companies have been attending the financial district, which is very much the beating heart of Riyadh. And then the different levels here you can see, and over 500 meetings B2B for our companies with operators, developers, potential buyers, and so we've very much activated the local community. We've chosen Joforma to design this installation. 38 companies have participated with 241 products. And once again, we have focused on the cultural aspect. 33 moderators and speakers from 11 countries. A lounge is being designed by Lissoni and partner, with pieces of furniture from Italy, where the B2B meetings were actually taking place, and they were fully booked the whole time. So, well, congratulations on your efforts. This is Miami partnership, 3 years with Art Basel, Miami. We've traveled to Miami, soon we'll be to Hong Kong, and we've curated the lounge. And it might make you smile because it was almost all Hollywood jet set style. You can imagine, on top of collectors, curators, we also had some very VIP visitors. Unfortunately, no pictures. Yes, no photographs. But they wanted to take the pieces of furniture away. So you can imagine they were sitting on living couches, etc., and they would not leave, you know. Now, smiles aside, Salone is very much around the world. Maria Porro. So we said that the first portion of the annual report is devoted to infrastructure, whereas the second part speaks about the paradox of showing, and this is something that we're going to talk through Alessia Capello, Councillor for the Economic Development from the Municipality of Milan, Francesco Zurlo, Professor, Milan Polytechnic, Giampiero Carocci Silvagni, Fastweb and Vodafone. Councillor Capello, we have started to go through this beautiful map. It has increased by numbers, complexity, but if we say the paradox of showing, well, the risk is that you might hide messages. So what are the priorities for the City Hall? Well, good morning. Thank you to Salone del Mobile for choosing this very venue that I am really fond of, that it is very dear to me. I very much like it. So thank you so much for choosing this venue. It is beautiful to be here today. So thanks again. Now, the value of Milan Design Week in terms of the results is crucial. It is no doubt the most important week for the city of Milan. So an incredible value. And considering a year where we would not have this week would be critical. And it's not by chance that during the pandemic, we have actually chosen to take on the risk, and we were still actually allowing the event to happen. We were still having Salone del Mobile taking place. It is far too crucial for us from a business standpoint. As Director Tarantino said, and I was reading through his speech this morning, but then I was listening to his words, and I very much appreciated, is when he spoke about the relationship with the city. So technique and politics, polis in some senses. So this very strong relationship between the Salone del Mobile, design, and what happens all around the city. We might even say the cultural dimension of design, which is so valuable. Of course, the business side is important, the tourism is important, the sector buys are important, and what the city does and what the city has done over the last few years and what it keeps doing through ongoing investments that Maria told us about, because they keep traveling all around the world to tell what is the value of design in Milan, what's going on in Milan, inviting the rest of the world to come and see. But the cultural dimension, which is perhaps unparalleled, something that we cannot really valorize and we cannot really provide real figures, but it still is the greatest strength of the Milan Design Week. And the relationship between what happens in the exhibition area and the rest of the city, it might have been copied in other parts of the world, but it is so strong and powerful here in Milan, it is not be replicated good enough elsewhere. What is important, though, is that we want to keep this value as high as it is. And what do I mean? Now, making attempts of delivering, disseminating education and culture. Well, there have been many attempts, but the culture of design, it should really be on top of everybody's mind. So what is it that, to me, it is so important in this annual report? Now, aside from numbers and what numbers are saying, is very much the awareness, is the fact that we become conscious that all the players playing a role in the Milan Design Week are becoming aware of the social and economic value for the city as a whole. And also, they should become even more aware of the role that each one of us can play throughout that week. Now, this awareness should really allow all of us to very much focus on that cultural value and commitment and preserve it as it is. Mossabetta keeps saying, you know, being on the top of a mountain was many years, and then it takes 2 seconds to come down, and not necessarily you're able to go back and reach out to the peak. If you really want to be on the peak of a mountain, you have a role to play. Professor Zurlo, the map shows us to what extent the complexity of Design Week has grown. Now, I'm sure you can clearly see the reassuring numbers, but also you have tried to, let's say, wondered about the direction that Milan Design Week and Salone del Mobile should take in the future. First of all, thank you so much. Thank you, Salone del Mobile, for entrusting us with this beautiful research. Of course, we try to kind of develop labels, which is what we heard of this morning already. I have to say that hearing Maldonado words is very moving to me. He's been the founding father of the design school at the Polytechnic, which I'm honored enough to bring forward. So these are very much the key words. But the most significant among these is the urban ritual. It is a sort of a large festival where there is an ongoing stage that you may look at and you may visit. And sometimes the stage is even more important than the goods which are being showing, hence the paradox of showing. So the showing itself becomes even more significant than what you're showing. And this is bringing to some very complex considerations which may lead to how to best showcase the products. So what we have understood, so we've been able to kind of label all of this through the research we made on site. We've included over 100 students from the School of Architecture and School of Design at the Politecnico in Milan. And we've asked them to take care of a survey, a questionnaire, and we were mapping slightly over 8,000 events. We were collecting information from press release and everything that was already available end of March, and 80% of observation were actually being made on site. So the initiative was called Passion in Action. So those people, those 100 students were very much interested in understanding more about this phenomenon. And this is one of the many different things they've observed. So this is the density of events throughout the city of Milan. Now, they are specifically focused in the city center, but there's quite an interesting diffusion around the other neighborhoods. See how important is the Duomo area, with Via Durini, Via Festa del Perdono at Università Statale, or Brera. Well, big numbers here, almost civil protection. So it means that you're basically coming across one event every 30, 40 steps you make. This is quite significant. And it shows us how and to what extent the city can really become a stage welcoming these incredible events. Now, the several types of organizers are there listed. Most of them are companies. We do have design studios, but also work groups, maybe teams of designers, and we do have cultural contributors and universities, schools, and academia. They still have quite a significant presence, but they're not so much committed in actually developing and organizing events. We then come down to the venues, the areas which are devoted to these events. Most of them are actually taking place for 1/3 in commercial areas or cultural venues. And also some of these spaces are actually closed to the public. So 257 events were off-limits spaces. Palazzo Letta, Circolo Filologico, to mention one example, or Corriere della Sera, so the historical headquarters of the Italian newspapers, Corriere della Sera in Via Solferino. So the city literally opens up and it allows people to discover places which are usually off limits. This is Istituto Marchiondi. This is an example of a brutalist architecture. It was neglected, let's say, from the end of the 50s, and it's been devoted to the underprivileged young people. And we were actually visiting this back in 2023, thanks to Luchi and Branzi. And finally, I'm happy to say to all of you that there is a new purpose of use for this space, which is going to become a campus for 160 university students. And these are the objectives of events being organized in the city. Mass-produced products, enable access to key potential clients, research projects, site-specific, and what we've seen already in terms of how to best showcasing products on the stage. So these are the installations which are taken into account the features of the site. Of course, we will further complete this table, but I'd love to hear from Maria Porro. So what is the Design Week offering to all of these? Well, first of all, I think it is about what I said already. So stability. It's been over 60 years that we've been fully devoted on these topics. We do commit to an international campaign, 15 stopovers all over the world, and then the number of visitors who are coming to our city, and not only to go and see the Salone, but also to kind of experience the celebration in the city. Salone is there almost throughout the year, because if you consider the cultural institutions, creative industries that they have been described in the report, well, they are operating all year round, and they are supporting, they are making everything happening. And there might still be some weak spots that we want to detect and fix. And this is why we've developed this observatory. And in collaboration with over 22 data holders, and we have a new scientific partnership with Vodafone and Fastweb, which allows us to further broaden our, our field of scientific investigation. And I'm really thankful for this beautiful collaboration. Carocci Silvani. So what have you observed? Because, of course, you very much focus on a digital aspect. And what is the data telling to us? Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for this beautiful invite. I'm happy to share the numbers which we provided for the sake of this annual report. Obviously, this is anonymized data. It's being kept private, confidential, but it is actually able to return important pieces of information around where people are located, what do they do, and so on. Let me share with you the three top aspects that you would like to look at, because it is actually saying us something different versus data which has been collected over the last few years. So we're talking about growth, and co-visit is a second aspect, and the nature of the public, nature of how the audience is composed. So in terms of growth, well, attendees, visitors have increased in number. We have understood that some of this growth is happening thanks to impact of Salone by 50% when compared to any ordinary day. And I'm talking about Tortona, Università Statale, Brera. And so if you but of course, the Duomo area is the most important one. And then the second aspect, we wanted to understand how the population breaks down. And we're actually able to say that over 50% of visitors are aged between 25 and 60 years of age. And this is clearly the professional age bracket of the people attending. But second, right after, we're actually having 16-24 age brackets, so the very young ones. And it is not surprising that this type of cluster is the one that moves around, that travels around the most. And this is not surprising. And they're also attending the evening events. This is not surprising, I understand, but it's been confirmed by data. And then international commerce. Well, numerous. In some areas like Alcova, we've reported an increase by over 300% of international attendees. And then the third aspect that I wanted to mention, so the co-visits, the correlation in terms of how people move around, travel around the area of interest. So we do consider in a time lapse of 48 hours, we try to see what people are doing, where people are moving around. This is showing that there's some urban areas that, irrespective of pre-established journeys, there are some random journeys which people are actually using to travel all around the city. Those who go to Brera, they tend to go to Tortona, they tend to go to Università Statale. If they start from Cinque Vie, they'll go to Palazzo Litta. And this is interesting, right? Because it is saying us about a city which has been visited and walked in a kind of a connected manner, although they tend not to follow necessarily the pre-established pathways. I'd love to conclude by saying that what I'm showing here is a beautiful impact of Salone, which we can now read in a very objective manner and ongoing, especially, which is so important. And it tells us about a city which is very much becoming more interconnected, super intense lifestyle, and it moves around people in space and time. Councillor Capello, I think the photograph is quite complete. The overview is quite complete. We've also seen correlation in behaviors. But there's also the need to coordinate this unbelievable map. So how do you actually get prepared for 2026? Well, every year the municipality of Milan launches a tender, and there are four things that we look at. We do want to measure the valorization of cultural aspects. So in public areas, we shall only have cultural events ongoing, because when it comes to the commercial side, well, the Salone is taking care of it, as well as the Salone Satellite. They play crucial roles also in the commercial side. So the city means to open up and develop a narrative around the cultural side of it, kind of neglecting the commercial side. Second point, which is extremely important, because we're talking about the culture of design, this has to be open to everyone. Hence, accessibility for people who are perhaps disabled, or we very much insist on events to be accessible to everyone. Sustainable, so sustainability for us as part of the administration, well, environmental sustainability is a key focus. Maria always mentions the investment and the big attention that is paid to the environmental sustainability. And there are two more things that I've really been engaged in. One I've mentioned already. There's not just the city center of Milan. I understand it's a beautiful place to be. But again, we want to broaden this up, and we want to allow other districts, other areas where the design lever can be used also for urban requalification, focusing on how it is important to actually experience design in our daily life. And this takes me to the example of Marchioldi. From 2023 onwards, we have decided to make some private spaces, neglected spaces, once again available to the larger audience, so that they can have a new life. The House of Water, Alcova, is another example. So, and this has also happened in a former military hospital, which has been newly opened, or marvelous buildings that they had been closed for many years in Monza. So it's not just the City of Milan, but also the metropolitan city of Milan. These are the four key goals, but when it comes, say, to cultural and commercial design, of course, Salone del Mobile is the one crucial place you want to be. Thank you, Councillor. The role of Serial will be important. Thank you, Francesco Zurlo. Thank you, Giampiero Carocci. We are now actually addressing the the so-called Chapter 3 of the annual report. We started from Salone as an infrastructure, and now we're talking through Milano Design system. Massimo Bianchini, professor from Milan Polytechnic, Angela Rui, curator and researcher, head of Master of Arts at the IED in Milan. Professor Bianchini, I'd love to ask you first. Now, this design system, Milan Design System, which has also been called the invisible infrastructure, can you tell us more about it and what you have studied? First of all, I'd love to say what is the Milan Design System. It is all of the activities, cultural, commercial, and exhibiting activities, which over the years have very much layered over the years, up to making Milan the capital city of Milan. I have few slides, and I will introduce some interesting numbers, which will allow you to understand how this system is composed by and how it has increased over the years. We have presented a map in 2025, which was already the result of the efforts from 2024. Now, the first piece of information you read is the most updated, consolidated number from ISTA, Statistics Agency, and it is talking about a 7,360 subject design core, which is composed of over 2,000 companies and over 5,000 self-employed professionals, freelance workers, which are developing specialized design activities in Milan and in the province of Milan. Now, this piece of data, if compared to the previous report, it shows a growth by 8%. What is unchanged in the number of people working within this very system. So this data is showing and confirming how Milan is really the propelling engine in the whole of Italy, as there so many enterprises attending here. But if we break this down and trying to further delve into it and try to understand how is this 7,360 number breaks down, we can see self-employed freelancers, which are growing much more if compared to corporations, to sole proprietorship, whereas we do report a decrease in partnerships. And what is this slide saying to us? That if we consider professions as a whole, there is possibly an evolution. It is becoming more flexible, dynamic, and much more optimized and maximized. I'd love to share the next slide, which speaks about specializations. So what do companies develop mainly? Chamber of Commerce of Milan has assisted in this. They have shared information on the enterprises taking care of design in Milan. Now, the one number that I actually love to share with you is that a Chamber of Commerce was providing data from 2009. So back in 2009, we were having some 1,300 companies, and they have increased by almost twice as much in 2025. When it comes to the specializations, enterprises taking care of design, they are either working on more on the communication piece, and on the other side, product and fashion. Other specializations were growing in 2025, and This means that we do also considering the so-called emerging aspects. This year, we have also had the possibility through the maps that you've seen. We have tried to leverage a database, and we have tried to understand where these design enterprises are located. And the result is visible on these maps. So basically, 3/4 of enterprises are located in the municipality of Milan. The remaining portion is scattered around the city. So more on the external neighborhoods. A few more slides to tell you about numbers again and to tell you about other components of Milan Design System. So we have been provided data in terms of a number of commercial companies distributing products, furniture products, home products, which are located in Milan and around the city. Well, the number is unchanged year on year. What is interesting, though, is that 88% of times they're very small-sized companies, meaning they're managing between 1 and 3 outlets, and over 60% of them, they're based in Milan. This is still a number that is not to be neglected. Research for innovation, so design startups and innovative SMEs. And again, we've received this data from the Chamber of Commerce. So they have been 34. It's a small number, I understand, especially it's 1% of the overall startup ecosystem, but actually accounts for 70% of design startups in Lombardy, and even greater if you consider nationwide. And that is possibly a number that we should ponder on. One very last thing, yes, if you allow me to. Well, this has to do with training, education. So 42 educational institutions map in terms of design schools. Milan is very well known for this, and we were indeed able to map what you see on the slide. So private design schools, universities as well, online universities, and the AFA institutes, which is high formation. If you take the students' population, and again, this is a number which is being provided by the Ministry of Culture in this case. It means that if we consider schools which are accredited by the ministry, so this is the number of students who have enrolled in 23-24. So we have had 17,400 students enroll in the academic year, reporting an increase by 15%. Maria, how do you read this number, and what is Salone doing with this invisible infrastructure from the Milan Design System? Salone del Mobile is very deeply rooted on the territory, and this is something that I always tell when I travel. Salone del Mobile is owned by the Federation of Companies. We do have President Feltrin here, which means that everything that Salone does, it is happening through the initiatives which are being supported by enterprises which keep investing, and everything that we do, it goes back to that very value chain. There's one number which I think was shared yesterday. So employed people have increased by a high number of people. Too bad that over 250,000 are above 50 years of age. And, when we try to consider startup, education, and so on, what Salone generates is an incredible example for vitality that has to be nourished by inside, and that, of course, it is both sitting on what it generates and in terms of the intangible capacity of producing culture and education, which perhaps is very much the biggest trend for the future. Angela, Rui, many boomers and few young people. And it's a big challenge to attract and retain young talent. I understand we need a fresh new energy, so how do we do that? Well, thank you for the kind invite. Good morning, everybody. So it is up to me to talk through young designers. Well, we've seen data. Milan is actually graduating a high number of newly graduates, but the system will only absorb half of it. So universities should maybe wonder on how to best develop the next narrative. So Milan is the city where you can come and study, and perhaps you will also be able to find a job and stay here, but also you have to be able to go and work elsewhere. But again, I'd love to share some numbers as well, as we should really wonder on how the culture of design could really help embrace the brain draining, which is a bad symptom and which is worsening. Year after year, that is increasing by 40%, which means that we keep losing bright minds. And it's not just about the profits, which are not being generated, but the cultural dimension is as important. And this is something that cultural operators should really tackle more in depth. So maybe we should address more long-term programs. We're now talking through the Milan Design system, maybe not just considering the week of Salone del Mobile, but also how to have a more long-term vision where actually students can develop interesting connections. But again, being very much on a long-term vision, something that is not temporary. This is something that we should really wonder about. There are some good examples. Base has been developing campuses for young designers in the past 5 years. And we're also trying to activate brand new projects, because not only we want to attract talents, but we have to be able to retain them. So having a virtuous relationship between public and private, and this is something that we do. Of course, young people are the future. There are so many things that we should do. 90,000 young people were leaving the country last year. Half of them were graduates. So the brain drain is very much a bad symptom that we should tackle. Well, thank you so much, Massimo Bianchini and Angela Rui. We're now going to focus on design, culture, production, design, habitat, and welcoming Stefano Mattei, Professor Milan Polytechnic, Andrea Rurale, Director of the Intensive Program in Art Markets and Finance. We need to speed up time, so I'd love to start from Professor Maffei. We heard from Maldonado's words, so many different players, the transversality. So what is it that is happening now from a cultural standpoint in design? Thank you all, and good morning. I'd love to start from the words of Maldonado. I did my university thesis. My dissertation was with Maldonado. So actually, I'm quite into the Arte and artfatti book of his. There's one thing that is really important and profound to me, because all of these resources, cultural resources that we're trying to map, they really stand out as the bridge between art and technique. So design as the one element that provides the tangible aspect to both of them. So what kind of mapping we've done? Well, it is an ongoing mapping, and the attempt is to define a cultural, let's say, pathway. And we have explored trying to put together the explicit areas mapping, something that we will maybe expand in the future editions, but also putting them in close contact with emerging venues or those areas which are not dedicated per se to design, but they can actually become still as important. The most relevant elements in these dimensions are what I would call diffused cultural production, which represents perhaps a permanent experiment, as Tommaso Sacchi said, and a colleague Bosoni from Politecnico, he says about the culture of project, the culture of design, which is a kind of a dance of different dialogues and connections amongst players and protagonists. And this is much generating what we're talking about today, collective learning. When you tackle design, it's not just a word, it is an ensemble of practices which are putting together a community of practice. I understand that I'm too slow, and you're asking me to speed this up, and I understand that you're very clear in asking me to speed up. Apologies. So we have mapped 533 cultural resources, which can be organizers and those who are active within the systems, but also we have mapped 258 places, because we have understood how this is important. It is not just the city, but it is a collective organism, which is also including the surrounding neighborhoods. And we have broken down in primary operators, which have a mission, design first and foremost, but also so-called secondary cultural producers, which is also including the artistic side and the entrepreneurial. You spoke about the invisible architecture, the network of enterprises all around this. So what we have learned is that you can't actually separate these two elements. There is a symbiosis. Maybe I could even call the martial industrial atmosphere, where everyone is engaged in an horizontal integration of roles, practices, and activities. So whilst you evolve, you can actually introduce all of this successfully. Maria Porro, this means to actually deliver culture, to generate culture. Well, I had slides, but I'll be very fast. I'll be very fast on this. So to do culture, to generate culture, is something that dates back to the past, and there have been several curators who have been in charge of highlighting and emphasizing some important venues such as Rotonda della Besana and Triennale. And these are initiatives which are not just for the Salone. This was an example, Tempietto from Mario Cucinella in Brera, co-produced. I hope you have all seen it. Because it is open for a full month, thanks to the partnership with Francesco Sforzesco, Mada from Wilson, whom we have convinced to come over to Milan, which is going to be showcased in the Maxi in Rome. So we have kind of another interesting seed, S. Devlin. S. Devlin was invited with their own initiatives, and thank you so much to Feltrinelli with their over 3,000 volumes, which are now sitting in Milan libraries, and the Library of Light. It is now on the beach of Miami during our Basel. It is a way of showcasing Salone del Mobile from Milan to the rest of the world through projects which are now passing after the week of Salone, but they're only generating new legacy elsewhere. We also have small examples, Design Kiosk in Piazza Scala, which is a very small project, or the Library of Salone. So thanks to the visitors that we receive, we're also collecting a significant number of books, which are being chosen year after year by important characters. Professor Rurale, how do you actually build all of these, and what kind of impact does it generate in terms of alliances? Well, you're actually able to generate alliances in many different manners. It is not just a practical collaboration on what can we do together, but how to best establish a project in the long run. What are the alliances that may work better? It looks like hybrid alliances are those that are working better, that are more successful. Players are coming from different fields, and they're bringing their own assets, and all of them, they might bring in their different skills, so managerial know-how, financial capacity. So collaborations and alliances that can really be successful are with enterprises, academia, public and private, those which are based on a common objective. And actually, what is the need out there is a clear governance, because frail networks has to really rely on governance. So what is it that we generate through culture? Well, economic capital, because of the tourism and the qualified occupation value chains, but also symbolic capital, the possibility for a Milan to become more well-known in the international landscape, and a social capital. You can generate sense of belonging. Milanese population, they have perceived a beautiful return because from Salone, because it was something that they perceived to really be significant for the whole of the city. And then cognitive capital, because of course a culture can generate knowledge. And this is what we're able to generate. Maffei, one last comment, 30 seconds. This is a system that has grown already. What is missing for this to become mature? Well, what Rurale said, is one thing you really want to invest. You want to perhaps consider platforms, digital platforms, which may allow a better coordination for this entire system, and also the orchestration or else the light coordination that could rely on these hybrid so-called alliances. So I think this is very much the key objective of the annual report. So Rurale also has learned a lot on how to attract audiences. Well, the key lesson is that audience not only needs to be increased, but also needs to be activated. And I'm also in charge of FI. And what we want is to have a more aware citizenship, so more aware citizens. And the last thing that I'd like to say is that audience does not just mean the people that we want to reach out, but audience can become a resource that you activate through co-creation. You can generate this culturally aware citizenship. Maria Porro, you're also an entrepreneur. So is this a strategic theme? Well, this was not a question that was in the list, but I love this question. I think we are very much playing a crucial role. The capital city of design and furniture is Milan. Milan is in Italy, made in Italy products. They're so appealing. They are so very much appreciated, and they can actually boost such a longevity, which makes all of the products we make so much important. And this is ongoing through this transversal pollination across disciplines. But that doesn't mean that we can sleep on it, because only thanks to the cultural contamination we can grow. This is why we keep nourishing and stimulating enterprises to be more innovative, to have a better confrontation, more partnership. A clear example, the Compasso d'Oro with the Triennale. So ongoing, factual relationship, not just aiming at a communication. You don't want to make it temporary. You want to develop common goals, which are obviously going through the enterprises, and made in Italy can then become strategic in the future. Otherwise, we keep leveraging the past, and that doesn't help. Well, thank you, Andrea Rurale. Thank you. Professor Zurlo, if you can come back and now consider the city impact transition, but also the next step, the future actions. Okay, so let's start with some numbers here. Okay, but again, if you can try to speed up. So we have analyzed the visitor journey, and these are the 6 items: so arrival, stay, spending, the average spending throughout the 7 days, security, so safety, environmental impact, and so on. As you can see on the slide, we do report an increase in attendees and also number of stays in the city. So this mechanism, it is still delivering and producing a great capacity of attracting people. And this becomes even more interesting for people coming from abroad. If you see the overnight stays by foreign visitors, which is showing a very, very small decline, although the average of overnight stay, it is slightly increasing year on year. You can also appreciate this important phenomenon of growth of hospitality. And the non-hotel accommodation grows sharply across Lombardies, and it is growing quite significantly in the province of Milan and across the region Lombardy. In our report last year, we had also shown how Salone del Mobile it is actually delivering an impact not only on the city of Milan but also on the entire region Lombardy. A bit more of a controversial piece of data is the average increase 24 on 25 in terms of costs of a hotel. And these numbers are quite relevant that should really make us say ponder. Yeah, of course. We're talking about 1,000 euro per night up to 3,000 and above per night. Now, of course, this is a slide that we should really try to consider, ponder around, and make it more inclusive. If we want to attract young professionals and students, well, it becomes really difficult if that is the cost. It is very difficult to orchestrate the market, though. Yes, I'll try to be very concise. So this is the impact, induced impact, 278 million. We spoke through this number already. What is generated by foreign visitors and also the per capita. So 275 euros. Peak. It's been actually the weekly spending reaches its peak during the Milan Design Week. Please look at these Instagrams where the peaks, so 24 and 25, these are numbers that you can clearly read through the annual report. And this is data relative to mobility. I'd love to draw your attention in terms of use of the tube and shared mobility. Micromobility is also increasing, and private transportation, it is also fairly significant. Okay, so Mrs. Porro, now in light of all these numbers, what are your final considerations for 2026? Well, that was a really interesting slide. Well, I just love to repeat what has been said already. So what comes out here, and this has come out also during our roundtable, that we have to rely on a directing idea, directing vision, which really aims for a common goal. Well, everyone, all players should take on responsibility, and the report is literally inviting us to take on responsibility for our share. But also, we should tackle those critical aspects, and we must have a shared project. So there has to be a kind of a regia, a kind of directing, which allows this all to be more successful. And so something that we may call the light touch coordination. Yeah, on top of this, I perhaps wanted to focus only on a potential experiment, on targeted experiments during the Milan Design Week to understand whether we can actually have durable benefits for urban spaces and neighborhoods. And these are some examples. We might consider how to use public space in a different manner with respect to the past, organizing micromobility events to understand to what extent we can actually explore that dimension, or working with citizens more in a local manner, or having new cultural formats in engaging young people. And we've come up with an idea. So there have been 2 roundtables, and I know that many of the people attending here are participating. So if we're able to have this light touch coordination, we will be able to actually open the roundtable to young people. So the proposal from 2026 onwards is to include 100 young people from the 42 academia which we've mapped in the roundtables for a more informed decision-making. This is a signal that we want to provide also 26 years away from the birth and the establishment of Salone Satellite. If you want to be part of it, actually, we would ask everybody to take part on February 2026, February 11. But of course, we will communicate more around this. This is something that we can do, Professor Maffei? Of course, we can do it. And this is the beautiful outcome of the efforts that we made together that I was unable to actually explain in full. But this is clearly showing that the conversation is becoming more articulated, and the intention of Salone del Mobile has never been so clear. So having tools for pondering, but having tools for communicating better and coordinating better. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, President from Salone del Mobile, Maria Porro. And the second edition has been duly shared with you. I would invite President Feltrinelli. So Maria Porro reminded how important it is for enterprises, for your enterprises, to be part of this. Now, Salone was being established over 60 years ago, thanks to this great intuition. So we needed to, all the enterprises wanted to have the best way to showcasing what they were doing. In over 60 years, they have been committed and they've been delivered a successful model. At the very beginning, it was really small, but it has grown and grown gradually, and it has now become truly international. Now we're experiencing an important phase of transformation, and you know, there's a pre-COVID and post-COVID, and to me, it's like before Christ and after Christ, if you see what I mean. It's been such a huge shock, because we were all obliged to cope with changes, and Salone also was obliged to face this change. But what has happened after is actually the new flagship. The new flagship means that the Salone must adapt to changing times. So it will become increasingly important, not only for Maria, but Maria and her team, of course. Well, they're doing a huge efforts for the sake of this transformation, because our enterprises, they really need for this showcase, for this stage to be more suitable, more adequate, and more appealing, so that we can leverage exports, because we do actually rely on exports. We do survive through exports, and unfortunately, the results that we're able to make in a year not necessarily will be granted for the following year. And this is something you always want to remember. So pre-COVID, post-COVID, pre-Trump, post-Trump. Hopefully, this will not happen. But what is the role of Federlegno Arredo in all of these? Well, if I can broaden quickly this answer, less and less people are going to vote. There's less citizenship engaged in what happening. People are not feeling they're being duly represented by politicians. And this is one example. This is a crisis that we're experiencing in Italy. And I'd love to use this kind of comparison to what we do, because actually what we should do, we should actually capsize this trend entirely. Let me just share one example. Being a federation allows us to actually stand to stand against a piece of legislation which would have provoked many big issues to our enterprises. Now, because we are part of a federation and we're actually part of a much bigger European federation, we were able to tackle this effectively and have a voice in the EU. If we hadn't been so strong and if we hadn't been so much able to actually network with our European partners, we would have not been able to actually untrigger this kind of a bomb that was very much about to explode. So being part of a federation is crucial. Otherwise, there would be, politicians there in their building against the population out there. And actually, we know about the conversation around tariffs and so on. So how are you actually closing the year? How is your industry closing the year? And how are you adapting to this new changing scenario? Crises always allow you to ponder and make decisions accordingly. Well, we have clearly seen that an easy signature from President Trump, it's not our president, but President Trump has heavily impacted our economies in a matter of a few seconds, literally. And now, of course, the tariffs policy, it is now expanding differently in different areas in the world. And the impact, if we're looking at it in data between January through August, we actually report minus 1.4 versus the United States. But we should not we should not consider this so negatively, because if we consider August and September, we report minus 15 and minus 9 in September, year on year. And if that is the trend that we're going to experience, well, the United States will surely close with a percentage which is greater than minus 1.4%. It will be negative by 5%. But the trend will allow us to see what 2026 will be like, because the geography of markets will change. Because Saudi Arabia, China, Expo in Japan, so Salone has traveled all around the world. And how about the Mercosur? Because signature is not yet there, but the framework is close. Well, we were hopeful that Mercosur framework would be more optimistic, would be more favorable. It would open up to new markets. But actually, if you very much analyze the whole thing, the moment it is being signed, what is the effect for our value chain? Well, effects will not be short-term, but they will rather be diluted in longer times. And the most important market, because it is high spending and because of a very similar taste, is Brazil. But it is not just tariffs incoming, and there's all additional tariffs which are not being discussed at Mercosur. So we're now having a product which is actually getting 100% on top when it's being imported. So this is a math that, of course, we will do soon. So what's 2026 going to be like? Well, now, through the crystal ball, because actually in such rapidly changing times, you can, of course, try to feel hopeful, reading small signs, small signals. There has been an increase in export in kind of sleepy markets. For instance, Germany is recovering. There's a positive sign that they have forgotten about. There's a positive sign for the UK, and that is important as well. So there are some positive signs out there. I would say that the first semester will be really cautious. I don't very much expect big changes. from a commercial standpoint, or perhaps the second semester next year might be more positive. It will very much depend upon the geopolitical aspects. Are they closing this conflict with Ukraine? Will they close it? When is it going to happen? This is not something that, of course, we may impact. We will just react, unfortunately. So, well, the best of luck. The best of luck, President. Thank you for being with us today. So we have now introduced the press release. Good morning, everybody. So the campaign starts with everything begins with a meta. To quote Sossas in his book, matter has its own emotional language. Therefore, design today must go beyond objects, and it has to be bearer of meanings and emotions. We have looked for raw materials very much associated to the world of design to tell how these materials can have their own voice, and then through the human intervention. From here, we came to the concept of a salone. Matter has raw material and matter has meaning. A series of objects selected for their aesthetic can really become milestones, such as the petal embodying the aesthetic sensuality of form, up to the sponge, which is speaking for absorption and revolution. It has allowed industrial design to actually change its borders, volumes, and go towards other direction. And stone as well as a wood. Now, we start therefore from petal, stone, sponge, wood. And they really represent the milestones that we base our emotional journey. The explosion of these subjects, which will be mainly showcased and displayed all around the city in Milan, and how they can unfold as a journey of transformation. So the man starts working, feel the emotional connection with these four objects, and develops an evolution of the materials themselves. So the campaign will evolve over time, and it shows us how this can actually bring to new meaning, starting from the matter as it was. General overview here of the evolution of the objects. Fairly simple workings, which will still leave a free imagination. Through emotion, through thinking, through a mental process, you can imagine matter to evolve into something else. These are the only numbers I want to show. 4 materials, 6 talents, and 6 talents. Therefore, the idea to create an international community where the exchange is an engine of the evolutions coming from 4 different countries. These are the talents we have engaged in the campaign. And the idea
l'idea è appunto quella di far comunicare tra loro talent da campi semantici diversi, farli lavorare sulle stesse materie e vedere.
Charles Negret, one photographer involved in the project, said that every material has its own energy. We need to learn how to channel that energy and to make it become something new. And as we do this, we shall never neglect the emotional aspect, because this is the only way that really allows you to come to something new. So this is what I was saying. We want to develop a creative community which may contribute collectively. And I will leave you with the interview to Charles Negret throughout the unfolding of the campaign.
Charles Negret durante lo svolgimento della campagna.
I always work with raw materials. It's like when you just comment on something natural, it has to be raw. You take it from the outside, out of the context, you place it in the studio, but it keeps its own energy. So basically you just have to channel this energy through the picture, and then it's done. Never take the emotion out of sight. Otherwise, you lose the whole point of everything. Like, even objects have emotions; they talk to each other, and if you lose this bound to your picture, to the camera, to yourself, then you lose the whole point of making the picture. Polyphonic, as many voices as possible. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Federico. Well, we have opened with Tomás Maldonado. We have closed with Charles Negret. We traveled all around the annual report, April 21, 26, 61st edition. Press conference will take place on January 21, 29. Thank you all for being with us. Happy festivities. I will meet you all next year. Thank you.